a 38-year-old lady with complaints of reduced appetite and weight loss for the past 6 months, and abdominal pain for the last 3 weeks, bleeding for rectum for the past 1 month.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask details about the chief complaints. So first is coming to the acute complaints. That is the first complaint, that is reduced appetite and weight loss. How much?
So the emergency is the bleeding for rectum. Okay, apparently. Okay. So the patient has come to us for bleeding for rectum. So that's the emergency. She came to ER.
Okay.
So what would you like to ask?
So maybe I would start with the most emergent complaint then, that is bleeding for rectum.
Yeah.
So I would want to ask whether it was how much was the quantity? Was it painful? Was it painless? Was it fresh blood? Was it melena?
Was it is fresh blood. So let's go one by one. It is fresh blood, and she had 3 to 4 episodes, about 200 to 300 ml of bleeding for rectum.
Okay, ma'am.
For 1 day. Okay, so for 4 episodes almost.
Okay.
And not associated with any abdominal pain. She would just get some discomfort, and there'll be a spurt, and there'll be clots, and she passed 300 ml.
Okay. Was it separate from stool? Or
yeah, it was only fresh blood.
It was
no stool. Yeah.
Okay. So this is painless bleeding per rectum. Was it associated with any stool urgency? Or
no urgency. It is episodic, no?
It is episodic. Okay. And
what are the other important questions that you would ask?
Was the bleeding associated with any syncopal episode?
No, apparently she could sit upright and she did not have much of syncopal attack. There was no giddiness and she had no blackout. Yeah.
Was this associated with any upper GI bleed in the form of hematemesis?
No hematemesis.
So
what's your conclusion as far as the pain is concerned? What else would you ask? Can you differentiate from this bleeding for rectum, it is upper or lower GI bleed?
Yes, ma'am. Since it is a large quantity, it is fresh blood, and it is painless, I would like to have 2 differences. One is from the distal lower GI tract, or a rapidly bleeding upper GI or small bowel bleed present in a similar area.
How would you differentiate these two? Anything that would differentiate between this upper GI bleed and you said from the distal portion of the colon? Dr. Edvick, you can ask your question.
Yeah, ma'am.
How would you differentiate? This is upper or lower GI bleed? Or it's a mid-gut bleed? How would you? Could be even a mid-gut, no?
Yes, ma'am. A small bowel bleed could present, a rapidly bleeding small bowel bleed could present this way.
So can you just, so first is bleeding for rectum. How would you distinguish an upper GI bleed proximal to ligament of Treitz, mid-gut, and a lower GI bleed, where there's fresh blood in the portion?
One is
quick, yeah.
In an upper GI bleed, it will be there will be melena rather than
no.
In a proximal lower GI bleed, there will be mixed with stained with stools.
1 minute. Can you get hematochezia with upper GI bleed? You said some rapid transit.
Rapidly bleeding, rapid transit can cause.
So, how much of blood should be lost from an upper GI bleed to cause a hematochezia? 1.5 liters.
1.5 liters.
So, if that is so, what will be the clinical presentation?
So there will be giddiness.
Yeah, exactly.
Postural symptoms.
Postural symptoms will be.
So that will be more classical, no? So if the person has symptoms to suggest, postural hypotension, then the target almost goes to an upper GI bleed.
Upper GI.
Yeah. Whereas in the lower
a lower GI bleed generally does not produce too much of hemodynamic instability.
Exactly.
If there is a hemodynamic instability, the bleeding source becomes more proximal. It could be either in the small bowel or in the upper GI. Okay, that's what we need to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when the patient has come with upper GI bleed and hematochezia, they'll be in shock.
Exactly. Yeah. So because it's almost 1.5, that's the one that you get the bleed. Okay.
How much of blood has to go to get a melena? How much of blood should be there in GI tract to have melena? And
At
how
least
much?
90 ml.
60 ml. If you have 60 ml of
60
blood, you can have melena. And
Upper
if you have
blood,
one episode of bleed, how long the melena can be present?
For about 8 hours.
7 to 8 days.
7
to 8
days.
days.
8 days.
So you can have 7 days.
7
If you
days.
have a
Sorry, I mean
If
days.
you have a melena, the melena can last for 7 days after one episode of GI bleed.
How much of blood loss for an occult bleed?
For an occult bleed, about 30 ml. 15 to 30 ml. Yes.
So it's much less, yeah. So when you have melena, it's about 60 ml, and to get an occult bleed, it may be as less as 30 ml, so 15 to 20 ml. Okay. So basically, she's come with bleeding for rectum. So what? Then you just go backward. Abdominal pain for 3 weeks. So would you like to relate that abdominal pain? That's how you should go in this particular case. Or you see, chronologically, it is reduced appetite, abdominal pain, and
Reduce
bleeding for rectum.
appetite and weight loss for 6 months,
Months.
abdominal pain for 3 weeks, and bleeding.
Then
PR.
bleeding. But since she came with ER, so you're first asking the bleeding for rectum, and then you go a little backward. So now tell, what are the things you ask for the abdominal pain? And now you almost consider the possibility of a lower GI bleed, no?
Yes.
Rather than an upper GI. It may still be a mid-gut. We do not know. Can still. Which are the mid-gut bleed that can present as hematochezia? Mid-gut.
Any angio dysplasia, a duofoil lesion,
Gelify, yes, but yeah. Then, more common. Meckels.
Meckel's diverticulum.
Meckels diverticulum. Angiodysplasias will not present with so much of bleed, generally not. But a GIST tumor,
Just
the surface ulceration, leiomyoma, all these vascular tumors can present with a hematochezia, mid-gut. That is not anatomically mid-gut. We call it as a small bowel bleed. Small bowel.
He has got reduced appetite and weight loss for 6 months and abdominal pain.
Now you try to link up
3
it.
weeks with a lower GI bleed. Now, how do you associate bleeding PR, abdominal pain, reduced appetite and weight loss?
yeah. So I would like to elaborate on the second important complaint, that is abdominal pain. So I would want to know what was the onset of pain, what was the location of the pain, what is the character of the pain, was it
So location of the pain is somewhere in the right lumbar region. Right lumbar region. What else would you ask? Right lumbar region with GI bleed, and then
was it radiating to the back, or was it associated with any bowel move? I mean, any relation to bowels activity? The pain.
at times the pain would get relieved with passage of stool. Yeah. Then what else?
What is the character of pain? Was it a crampy pain?
Dull ache. She'll get intermittent.
The dull
episodes of
aching,
pain.
the most important thing is whether she has developed any altered bowel habits in the
Exactly.
form of constipation or difficulty in passing motion or passing pellet-like motion, or the caliber of the motion has come down. Because it's the important thing we are losing is reduced
Weight
appetite
and
and weight
appetite.
loss, and weight loss of 6 months.
Okay, and if a person has a pain in the right side and then has bleeding for rectum, what crosses your mind? What are the possibilities?
I would consider diverticulosis as one
One.
of the
Then,
possibilities.
but pain would not be a feature. Intussusceptive
Intussusception.
mass lesion. Yeah. So if the person says that I have a pain that goes from the right to the left, then I get a pain, there's some distension, and then the pain subsides. You can almost come to a conclusion what you're dealing with. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is the classical history. If you do not ask this history, you're likely to miss the diagnosis as well. Okay, so that's an important history. So diverticular bleed can be one. Intussusceptive mass lesion can be the second one. Where they have intermittent episodes of pain. And then what would be the nature of the pathology if she's got weight loss and loss of appetite?
So it would be more of a chronic pathology rather than an acute bleeding, or an acute on chronic pathology. So
What are the possibilities?
if reduced appetite and weight loss is there, I would like to rule out a malignancy. I would like to rule out any small bowel lesion which can cause malabsorption.
Malabsorption. Why malabsorption?
No, here is a reduced weight loss, abdominal
Where is malabsorption?
bleeding PR. There is no diarrhea.
The bowel habits are normal. ma'am.
Which
Yeah.
malabsorption?
Bowel movements are normal. Yeah. Sir is asking you a question.
Sorry, sir, I didn't.
Malabsorption will not produce too much of bleeding PR. No?
Yes.
unless you have a malabsorption associated with IBD involving the rectum as well as the small bowel. Otherwise, you don't get.
Consider malabsorption in this patient. Why would you consider
Somebody has
malabsorption?
abdominal pain, it's a letter thing with altered bowel habits, reduced appetite and weight loss for 6 months, and bleeding PR, she has come to you, which is an altered bowel habits, and then straight away your diagnosis will be
Hospitals.
Malignancy. Malignancy would be my
where?
Malignancy where?
Left colon, right colon.
right. In this case, I would think since it is separate from stool, it is just fresh blood. I would think of a left colonic malignancy.
Left colon. Okay.
But if the pain is to the right, to the left, then still a possibility of an intussusception
Intussusception.
is still a possibility. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Next slide. Bhargav, move on. Next slide. So as far as the weight loss and appetite was concerned, she lost 8 kilos weight. Okay, this case actually belongs to one of my colleagues, so it's her case. And 8 kilos over 6 months period. And basically there were no upper GI symptoms to account for the weight loss and loss of appetite. Abdominal pain was intermittent, lasting for a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Some abdominal distension, no vomiting, relief with antispasmodics, and at times with passage of stool. Okay, so we've discussed this, the previous slide. That's why I wanted to expand. Bleeding per rectum was just 24 hours prior to admission. Intermittent bleed, 300 ml each episode. No pain related to the bleed. No syncope, no fatigue, asthenia, no melena. So that particular history in the ER told us that we were not dealing with an upper GI bleed. Okay.
Yes.
We will not discuss here the findings, but this is how. So in the ER, you should be able to immediately quickly say if the patient has hypertension, giddiness, shock, patient in a state of shock, likely to be upper GI bleed. I would really pass a RIDES tube. In fact, I asked my colleague to pass a RIDES tube. Ensure 100% it was not an upper GI bleed. So what are the causes of upper GI bleed presenting as hematochezia? Just list 1 or 2 or 3 causes.
Rapidly bleeding esophageal varix can cause.
Varix, yes. Number one. Number 2.
Bleeding.
DU.
DU. Duodenal ulcer, Dieulafoy lesion.
Dieulafoy lesions, yeah. They can be real massive bleed. They get
An aortoenteric fistula or anything.
Sure, even aortoenteric fistula as well. Good. Okay, next slide. Next slide. So there is no history of hematemesis, no bleeding manifestation.
That abdominal pain was, where was it localized, ma'am?
Right side, but moving towards the left. Right, moving towards the left. No fever. There are no similar complaints in the past. She's not a known case of acid peptic disease. In 2017, she was diagnosed as autoimmune hepatitis. Had jaundice for 3 months, based on that, and with persistent transaminitis for about 3 to 6 months. We could not get a full detailed history. But ANA alone was positive, but liver biopsy was done. It was confirmed as autoimmune hepatitis. And imaging suggested that the patient had an underlying chronic liver disease suggestive of cirrhosis. So the patient was started on azathioprine, 75 milligram once a day, and has been on it till date. She is also a known case of hyperthyroid on treatment, no other comorbidity. Dr. LDK, I would like you to take up a discussion at this stage and discuss the bleed related to this.
Yeah. So this lady has got now autoimmune hepatitis diagnosed. She is on treatment for that, and she is also known to have hypothyroidism. So in this young lady, she's this lady who's 38 years old, has got autoimmune liver disease, biopsy proven, on azathioprine, now has got hypothyroidism. So that means there are 2 autoimmune diseases going on. One, she's got an autoimmune liver disease. Number 2, she has got, possibly she would have had an autoimmune thyroiditis, now one of the hypothyroidism, and on getting treated. Now, in the setting of a cirrhosis of liver, now she's got abdominal pain. Okay?
Now, just before that, ANA positive alone in this particular patient, all of the markers were negative as per the records.
It could be type 1 autoimmune hepatitis. It could be type 1 autoimmune hepatitis. Number 2, if they have done that IgG levels, then we could have had a scoring. Female itself is a scoring number 2. ANA positive 2. If you had an IgG more, then say more than 16 or more than 18, then it becomes 2 points. That itself will give you a more simplified autoimmune hepatitis score of
And
6.
absent of viral markers, if they are
Absence of
negative,
viral markers will also
will
give
add
a
to that.
-2. So that is okay. So ANA alone being positive, ANA alone being positive can happen in the type 1 autoimmune hepatitis, which is very, very common in women. And of course, it is very common in at the second decade, but it can also come in women. And she's also got no other other associated factor is hypothyroidism.
Now,
And
now can you want to link up the bleed with this? This is what happened. Oh, so she comes to the ER, the bleeding corrective, and then we had the report saying she's autoimmune hepatitis, underlying cirrhosis. So what will cross your mind?
There are 2-3 possibilities that are crossing my mind right now. First is I would like to keep a diagnosis of a decompensated chronic liver disease with portal hypertension and massive variceal bleed as one of the differentials for the bleeding for the hematochezia. The other would be an association of an autoimmune liver disease with an inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis. So that could present with hematochezia.
The weight loss, can it be explained in some other way? In a patient with AIH? You think she could have a risk of cholangiocarcinoma?
Yes, ma'am. Patients do have a risk of cholangiocarcinoma, especially if they have primary sclerosing cholangitis and AIH overlap, if that is the case.
So we don't have much information there. So
yeah, we don't have much information on that.
Yeah.
So she has had some, but she has an abdominal pain.
So actually, so what happened
she had only one episode. So we need to know whether she had any diarrhea or she had stools mixed with what is the frequency of stool?
All movements were normal. So my colleague who was seeing this patient, because of the weight loss and loss of appetite, she had some differential diagnosis for the bleeding corrective. What are the possibilities?
So still, the patient has been on azathioprine for about 3 years now. I would like to keep malignancy as one of the differentials for the bleeding PR in this case, as there is a risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma with long-term azathioprine use.
How long? What are the studies to substantiate the statement that you made?
About 4 to 7 years is the where azathioprine has been proven to be. I mean, there haven't been many long-term use of azathioprine studies, but up to 4 years it is recommended. 4 to 7 years is safe to be used. But there are reports of non-Hodgkin's lymphomas as well as.
You should be able to quote this study, Rohan. You have to mention, because studies have subsequently shown that when you compare that to the general population, the lymphoma rate is not that high.
That high?
Yeah. It is not. It is almost similar to the general population. So the risk has been negated by large studies. Thousands and thousands of people have been included in that study. So you should know that study. And in that particular study, the conclusion was the risk of lymphoma is almost similar to that in the population. So 3 years is too short a period.
Too short to develop a lymphoma.
Short to develop, but you have to keep that in possibility because the link is there. And the other possibility is, even if it was IBD, there's no symptom.
IBD, ulcerative colitis itself can lead to colorectal cancer in the.
Yeah, but there's no symptom.
How long? How long of ulcerative?
How long of ulcerative colitis? Okay.
The risk becomes only after 15 years. Okay.
If there is
after 10 years is a pancolitis, or if after 15 to 20 years after it is a localized left-sided colitis.
What is Ramakrishna's paper? What is the incidence of colonic cancer in IBD? His paper. What does he quote? So in a large series where they retrospectively looked into all the histological slides, they only found 5 out of 1,000 cases which had cancer. So according to him, it was 12 years after the onset of IBD, you can start screening. Dysplasia is uncommon, cancer is also uncommon, but you have to be aware surveillance is a must. And for us, that particular paper suggests that you can start screening after 12 years. 12 years was the cutoff. Okay. Next slide.
If in case there is an associated abnormality like an autoimmune hepatitis or a primary sclerosing cholangitis, then it does say that the surveillance should begin at an earlier.
Yeah, with PAC, yes. PAC, yes. We're not talking of that. IBD alone, I must say. IBD. Next slide. Next slide. So she's married. Her menstrual cycle is normal. She has one child. And so she had evaluation at a tertiary referral center outside. Okay, so now, what is your syndromic diagnosis at the ER? And what should you consider? Then we'll proceed to the examination.
So, my syndromic diagnosis is an acute lower GI bleed.
Upper GI bleed cannot be excluded.
With a possibility of upper GI bleed, considering the past history of cirrhosis and chronic liver disease.
Not a past history, known case.
Known case of chronic liver disease, background of chronic liver disease, with multiple endocrine or autoimmune conditions such as autoimmune hepatitis and hypothyroidism on a background. And a young
No,
female.
so supposing somebody has got a cirrhosis and got a lower GI bleed,
Yes.
what are the possible? What is your differential diagnosis? So she's got cirrhosis, seems to be well compensated. She's only on azathioprine of 75 milligrams. She's got a weight loss, and she had one episode of hematochezia, and she's got an abdominal pain. So somebody with a cirrhosis with lower GI bleed, what are the possibilities?
What are your differentials?
Rectal varices can be one of the possibilities.
Now, one it could be related to the liver, unrelated to the liver.
Yes.
So related to the liver, it could be portal colopathy. What are the lesions in portal colopathy you will get?
There'll be rectal varices, sir.
There can be rectal varices then.
There can be various AV malformations in the.
You can have multiple telangiectasias.
Telangiectasias.
Then you can have diffuse edema of the mucosa. Okay?
Yes.
Mucosa. Okay.
You've seen
Then
angioedema.
portal colopathy, can it produce diarrhea?
If it involves the rectum, it can increase the frequency of, it can cause proctitis and increase.
Can it cause diarrhea?
A bloody diarrhea is possible, sir.
Portal colopathy itself can cause diarrhea. In portal colopathy, there is a decreased sodium potassium ATPase activity, so there is decreased water absorption. So the water content of the stools have gone up.
Okay.
So that's a famous Weller study which this is seen in cirrhotic liver, but this is not seen in patients who have got no portal hypertension. Okay.
Yes.
And between extrahepatic and there is no increase in transit time. So it shows that the rectal ATPase activity is reduced, so they can have diarrhea. So they can have a diarrhea mainly because the stool or the water content of the stools go up in patients with portal colopathy. Number one. Number two, they can have telangiectasias. They can have rectal varices. Okay.
Only because of the pain, you're considering some other possibility.
So, because there's a pain, weight loss, and loss of appetite for 6 months, and she had a hematochezia.
What are the possibilities when you can have episodic bleeds? No, she's got it is episodic 3 or 4 times. Just 3 or 4 times. But every time she will have painless, you just plop in 300 ml and then it will stop.
Hemorrhoids, liver unrelated causes.
Hemorrhoid, not 300 ml. Come on. How can you ever answer like that? No.
Weight loss. She's got a weight loss and loss of
Keep that in
appetite.
mind. So which are the tumors that can have this episodic bleeding? That's your DD. That will be your DD, no? So what are the possibilities?
Rectal gist can cause.
Any ulcerated lesion.
Ulcerated
So what are the ulcerated lesions that can bleed? That's your differential.
Yes,
It's
just
very easy actually. In this particular case, you can make us clear about diagnosis and
No, logistically or statistically, the first thing you think of a non-hepatic cause is a left-sided malignancy.
malignancy. Yeah,
So you
exactly.
need to think of a patient who's got a weight loss, who's got anorexia, 38-year-old guy, and is going on. A 38-year-old developing a colorectal malignancy could be
Could be
a de novo malignancy. It can be, or she can have hereditary non-polyposis, colorectal polyposis, or she can be a part of a Lynch syndrome.
Yes.
So these three things, 38 years old. So immediately your history should have
yeah.
History,
family-
whether there was
family
any family history of
family history of
colorectal malignancy.
Okay. Yes,
It's not there.
Number two, so one is carcinoma. Number two,
uh,
large villous adenomas. Isn't it? There can be a large villous adenoma in the left side of the colon, which can bleed.
Polyposis, adult polyposis.
Polyposis. You can have a polyp which can bleed.
The adult juvenile polyposis, no? They are the ones, they also bleed quite a bit. And then you're just
The gist, most of the times the rectum can be exophytic. So remember that the gist generally in the rectum or something or exophytic, and they present with pressure symptoms. As they expand, they come with pressure symptoms. They don't have too much of luminous. They may have nothing because of extraneous pressure. Okay. That is more common than in stomach. I do agree, but stomach also you can have a completely exophytic gist. So this is what you can do.
So if you summarize at this stage, what would you be your final? I put it as autoimmune hepatitis. She's biopsy proven, okay? Autoimmune hepatitis with lower GI bleed, with a GI bleed. In the differential, you'll put it as with abdominal pain. Suggestive of partial small bowel obstruction, not partial obstruction. We do not know small bowel or large bowel. Etiology being autoimmune hepatitis with tumor, with a bleed. That will explain everything. Complicated is the GI bleed. It's a tumor that is causing the bleed, and with a comorbidity of a hyperthyroid state, and on azathioprine, and compensated cirrhosis. And that's also there, no? Autoimmune hepatitis with a compensated cirrhosis. Second differential will be still a variceal bleed, an incidental tumor, or whatever it is. But there is something there, because the patient complains of this intermittent pain, some fullness, and there is this symptom. Okay. So this will be a summary at the end of that history taking. Next slide. So this is on exam. You can just read out.
Yes, so
what do you see of the faces? Don't read the text. What will you describe of the faces?
There is wasting or hollowness of the cheeks, and
it's a spotter. It's a spot diagnosis. What is it? Pinched nose.
So there is,
microstomia.
What is it? There was difficulty in eversion. She could not raise forehead. What is it? Scleroderma. This is a spotter. If you see this patient, you will have no other differential but a scleroderma. Okay? So now read the finding.
So she had tachycardia, heart rate was 134 per minute. She had hypotension, BP was 90 by 60 millimeters of mercury. There was pallor, no pedal edema or icterus. Facies pinched, microstomia with immobile facies.
This we saw subsequently in the ward, okay, later. This is later, but not in the emergency room. Okay, then for abdomen, nothing specific. Spleen is palpable.
So there could be evidence. May suggest portal hypertension.
No veins, no anterior abdominal vein, no ascites, but spleen is palpable, 4 centimeter below costal margin, and liver span is normal. Cardiovascular respiratory system normal, CN is non-contributory. We saw some more features of periscleroderma much later, while in the ward rounds, but not at the emergency room. Okay. So what's the possibility now? Diagnosis remains the same, almost
yes.
the same.
Now considering scleroderma also, again an autoimmune disorder comes into.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would rather try to fit all of these into a single entity rather than label them as separate entities. I mean the autoimmune hepatitis and the GI bleed. So I would like to combine them together to give a differential.
So what are your differentials now?
In that case, this may be an autoimmune hepatitis variceal bleed. It can be a inflammatory bowel disease. It can be a malignancy.
No, just Rohan, keep the entire case in perspective. Bowel movements are normal. Keep the case in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
And it is not behaving like a variceal bleed. It's 300, 200, 250 ml. Spontaneous bleed. Understand? Your entire presentation here will just differentiate. You have to. What else will you look for on examination of the abdomen to know it's upper GI or lower GI bleed? One important point. Bowel sounds. Bowel sounds. If the bowel sounds are increased, small bowel.
If there is an evidence of obstruction, it may suggest an.
No. If there is a bleed and the bowel sounds are hyperperistaltic, it is more proximal.
Or upper GI.
Because always remember, blood is a cathartic. Blood is a cathartic. So that's why when the blood is there in the intestine, you tend to pass more number of stools as well as the bowel sounds bleeding thing. In a lower GI bleed, you will not get this rumbling sounds.
Exactly.
Supposing it's a left side. In a colonic bleed, you will not get this rumbling sounds.
What else will you look for something is missing here? What else will you look for in examination of the abdomen? Rectal examination, very important.
Yes, ma'am.
So there was fresh blood on the finger stall. And most important is this, mass appearing and disappearing. So unfortunately, she didn't have a pain. When we examined her, there was no pain. Except for the bleeding episode, there was no pain. Otherwise, very often it's not uncommon that when we find a mass, when the patient goes to the surgeon, they say there's no lump. It's actually an intussuscepting mass lesion that appears and disappears. So a simple intussusception mass also can cause bleeding per rectum, and it will be episodic. That is classical. That will be episodic. Okay.
Yes.
How will you proceed to investigate now? Now tell, and then we'll move forward.
Yes, ma'am. So I would
In
like
the ER, patient is in ER.
I would first like to get the hemogram.
So you'll first start her with IV fluid.
Okay.
Yeah, because.
So and the management, fine.
Management.
So I would first like to resuscitate her. If the hemoglobin is less than 7 gram per DL, I would like to give her blood transfusion to maintain a hematocrit more than 21%.
She may be having hypersplenism. So then that may just be normal. So you will send a sample, you start her on an IV fluid, bring a lactate on a slow so that you don't overload her. And at the same time, draw the sample and send for CBC. What are the samples you send now?
I would like to check for CBC,
CBC.
electrolytes. I would like to check for creatinine, liver function test, considering the background liver disease, blood urea. Blood urea will tell me whether it's an upper GI source of bleed, because urea absorption will happen and then there will be a rise in the urea level.
So that's how you differentiate upper and the lower GI bleed. So you have 2 or 3 clinical parameters and 1 or 2 biochemical parameters. Okay, what else will you send? So she is in the ER. Remember, she is having bleeding per rectum. So while you send the sample, what next would you do? She came at night. She came around 1 o'clock at night, and so they just
to be very sure, I would also like to place a nasogastric tube and check for any evidence of.
There was no bleed. Yeah, that we did first. There was no fresh bleed. Yes. And then what would you do?
After sending for this basic investigation.
And that morning she came at 12, and 3 a.m. she had a bleed, and again at 7 a.m. she had a bleed.
Yes, ma'am. So if she's actively bleeding,
she's actively bleeding. Doubt about that?
No. Since she is actively bleeding, I would directly like to proceed for a CT angiogram that would give me the location of the
CT angiogram. For what?
Contrast CT abdomen, in case there is a lesion which can be tackled by interventional radiology.
Versus colonoscopy?
Yes, ma'am. Or a sigmoidoscopy.
First do a colonoscopy or a sigmoidoscopy unprepared and see. If it's going to just be a mucosal bleed, how do we know that what will the CT angio will show? So the best thing is to just do a colonoscopy and see.
Would you like to prepare the colon? Or would you like to go for a straight colon?
I would like to go for an unprepared colon and sigmoidoscopy to start with, to look for features of basic ulcerative colitis or a bleeding ulcerated lesion in the left colon. And
left colon, you do not know. Left colon, it will be right colon, anywhere. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so move on. Bhargav, next slide. I've modified the history a bit for discussion's sake. Next slide. Bhargav, move on. Okay, let's go on, read it. Hemoglobin is 6 grams.
Hemoglobin is 8 gram percent. It's normocytic, normochromic with lymphopenia. Total counts are 5,100 cells. Platelets are 268,000. And ANA is positive. AMA, LKM1 are negative. INR,
ASMA was also negative. Okay. INR is 1.17.
yes. The serum electrolytes and renal function parameters are normal. The liver function test suggests direct hyperbilirubinemia with normal transaminases and an AG reversal suggestive of chronic liver disease and probable chronic liver disease. And there is evidence of the platelet counts appear to be 268,000. So this could be like a there could be chronic liver disease superimposed on that. There could be some acute inflammation or iron deficiency that can cause
Even a bleed can also produce can produce thrombocytosis.
thrombocytosis.
So she already had an endoscopy done outside. So the endoscopy was normal. So in your setup, if you don't have that report, you would go for an upper GI endoscopy and proceed.
Not a colon.
Colon.
You have to
You
go
can either do an unprepared colon, but in case you want to do a quick preparation, what can you do for a colonoscopy in a bleed?
What's the quick preparation?
You can give an enema, or you can do a large water flushing of the colon as you're doing a colonoscopy and going.
Water irrigation. Water
irrigation.
Yeah.
You can do an irrigation and then go for a colonoscopy. Okay.
You've seen it being done, Rohan?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Quite often.
Okay, next slide. So as per the COVID, this was more for the COVID screening. So she had no evidence of COVID infection, everything. And they did a screening of the CT. We told them to get a screening of the CT of the abdomen also. And there was some circumferential thickening of the distal transverse colon and marked pericolonic fat stranding and multiple pericolonic lymph nodes. And she also had gallstone disease and
Hepatic.
and irregular surface of the liver, suggestive of a cirrhotic liver.
So what does it suggest now?
What does it suggest now?
So
You
this,
wanted a CT, you got a CT.
this suggests some lesion in the distal transverse colon. So that could be responsible for the bleed.
What could it
Probably
be?
like an ulcerated lesion. Whether
No. Just here is an irregular asymmetrical wall thickening with pericolic nodes. Your diagnosis is?
What are the possibilities?
Adenocarcinoma.
yes.
One is-
Malignancy.
Malignancy would be the first difference.
Yeah, adenocarcinoma, lymphoma. Okay, these are
So the most between lymphoma and this thing, adenocarcinoma
adenocarcinoma.
is more common. That's what he's saying. She has come with a weight loss anorexia. And your first diagnosis will be an adenocarcinoma.
Adeno.
They mentioned
So
asymmetric.
even though a patient has got an autoimmune liver disease, and the possibility thus, whenever you have an autoimmune liver disease, you look and do a colonoscopy to rule out an IBD. A patient's presentation is very important. Well-to-do patient, a patient being fairly stable, having abdominal pain, weight loss, and intermittent bleeding. The thing is there in the distal transverse colon, and there was a bleeding. So what could be? Why was there a bleeding?
If the mass was ulcerated, then it could be
Mass could have ulcerated, it could have bled, or as madam said, it could have intussusception.
intersusception of the mass and
It
intraluminal
can happen.
endophytic lesion.
So distal colon is close to splenic flexure.
Reflection.
So there could have been this one which could have caused this. Okay. So your first diagnosis is what? So historically also, I think she was more in favor of having a malignant lesion in the.
Yeah. And to some extent we were right also, we considered the colonic possibility. That what is important is, see, the problem is here, now we are giving you the history because we have taken the history, okay? But in the exam, this is OSCE type, but otherwise in the exam you're supposed to be taking the history yourself.
History. This
Yeah,
is
that's what you'll miss. if you just say bleeding per rectum, it took us quite some time to get that history out. That
See, the
particular
pain.
history.
So
When he
that's
kept
very
on
important.
asking again and again and again and again, then she said, I got pain. Then when we asked, because it was episodic. Once it is episodic, you have to get episodic, painless would be diverticular bleed. Okay? Episodic pain can be a Meckel's diverticulum, that can bleed. But if it's episodic and painful, then it becomes intussusception, ulcerated lesion. Those are the things that come to your mind. See, here you're lucky that you're getting the history. So what are the chances of you missing on the history is something that's what we're not able to teach you. Have you got the point?
Yes,
It took us quite some time to understand by the next morning that, because I kept saying it. So we discussed this as lower GI bleed. In the presence of pain and this, we almost came to a reasonable diagnosis that we were dealing with a pathology involving the mid transverse or somewhere around, because it was coming from the right to the left and stopping there with a bleeding episode, and then the pain would subside. At times, the pain was intermittent with no bleed. So it was an ulcerated lesion. Okay? You understood?
Yes.
Okay, next slide.
One of the differentials prior to the CT scan, if this was not available, could one of the differentials considering the scleroderma be vasculitis?
Ectasias will not cause this bleed. No?
Vasculitis
It's
predominantly
all occult.
will come with some sort of
Angiodysplasy.
ischemic, or they'll come with severe pain disproportionate to the bleeding.
Yeah.
They will have intermittent bleeding, they can have diarrhea. But here is a lady, she has been losing weight and anorexia for 6 months, then later comes with a rectal bleed. Okay, that
Yes.
means anorexia and weight loss is much more common in this thing. So even though she has got a cirrhotic liver, logistically speaking, if in your 3 years of experience, a patient has come with a weight loss and anorexia and a rectal bleed or a hematochezia, and we have localized the left colon, this history of 6 months weight loss can always be malignancy. It can never be portal colopathy, it can never be IBD, it can never be anything.
Angiodysplasy.
IBD will not come to you in 3 years' time with a malignancy. See, this is where you need to put in your knowledge of theory. Will IBD come with malignancy in 3 years?
No, sir. It
For IBD to get a malignancy, it should be pancolitis. It should be more than 10 years in pancolitis and more than 20 years in left-sided colitis. Okay?
Yes.
The person who saw this patient thought of an IBD because she could not explain the weight loss and other things. So therefore, she proceeded with the colonoscopy. Okay.
That is what is important. That is what is important here. That's why when we came to the different, we said it could be related to the liver disease, unrelated to
Unrelated to the
liver disease. You look at all the, if you look at it in your 3 years or 2.5 years of training, majority of the time somebody comes with the weight loss, anorexia and hematochezia, I would rather say it could be, if there is an altered bowel habit, I would rather pitch in for a malignancy, despite the fact they may have a chronic liver disease.
Yeah.
Celiac disease will not come with one episode of bleeding. They come with malabsorption. They come with anemia. Okay, they don't come. And celiac disease does not come this thing. It's not very common. Celiac disease may be associated with autoimmune hepatitis, but they don't come with weight loss. And here, if you look at the chronology, it is the anorexia, weight loss, followed by bleeding. What has happened? So that is what is important here.
And other thing was, like this COVID time is one time that we found almost all patients, because of that, the psychological effect. That was the other thing, whether to attach importance to it. But the person who has been dealing with the patient, she's been following this case for 3 years. And suddenly when she saw this sudden weight loss, she said that she's missing something. You understood? Okay, next slide. So this was an emergency colonoscopy that we did. Okay? It was just an emergency because we already had an information that the upper GI endoscopy was normal. Okay? So this was, Bhargav, can you just shift to the right, to the left rather? So done outside. So already we had a I didn't want to disclose it there. We had a colonoscopy report showing 2 ulcerated lesions. Come to the right, the outside report. 1 lesion in the rectum, ulcerated lesion, and 1 lesion in the proximal transverse colon. And the person who was doing the procedure could cross and reached up to the terminal ileum. Ascending colon was normal. proximal transverse colon was normal, but there was one nodular ulcerated lesion in the transverse colon distal and one ulcerated lesion in the rectum.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and at that stage, already a sample had been sent to one of the hospitals, and the report came as NHL, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, with that,
From which of the biopsies did it come?
both. That's the report that we had. We had a formal report saying it was NHL. He'll show the slide next. And then immunohistochemistry said it was a possibly NHL. Okay, but here there was a patient who was bleeding. So what should you do? This was a report done outside. We already had this information. I didn't want to disclose it there, so we already had this report. So what should you do? Your patient has come with this report. Patient has come with the report upper GI endoscopy is normal. So what should you do? You have to repeat a colon because you have to first check. So we did have a discussion whether to go for a CT to know the site of bleeding and whether it could arrest the bleeding or go for this. So we decided since the patient is having a luminal bleed, why not go? So the person who did the procedure, as Dr. LBK said, they did water irrigation and we found spurters. Bhargav, can you expand that report? Expand the report. Can you just read that?
Yeah. So there was altered blood in the rectum with a clot. In the rectosigmoid region, a circumferential ulceroproliferative lesion with few pigment spots noted. No active ooze over here. Scope could be negotiated further with ease. So this was not a lumen occluding lesion, this rectosigmoid. Another circumferential ulceroproliferative lesion seen, probably in the distal transverse colon, with few pigmented spots and adherent clot.
That clot is same there, yeah.
Scope could not be negotiated further. And a mild ooze noted, which arrested on its own. No active intervention done. The impression was a left-sided colonic growth.
Biopsy was already taken, and hence we did not repeat the biopsy. So what should you do now?
Could this be like a synchronous lesion, left?
So what should you do? Leave what? So there are two lesions, appears to be synchronous lesions, NHL as per the report from outside. What should you do? Management of the patient.
Contra CT abdomen.
Patient is bleeding, yeah. Patient is bleeding. Patient has bled 3 times after your admission, 300 ml each time. Patient is oozing from all those ulcerated sites. What should you do?
Either an endotherapy or intervention.
What endotherapy? LBK, just take up the discussion here. LBK?
Yeah, madam.
Yeah, discussion here, management of this bleed.
So mild wound is arrested on the whole. So
what would you do? What are the options available? You think
what is this?
you think the bleed would stop? The spurters, basically it's episodic bleed, 300 ml.
So it wouldn't stop on its own. It would require intervention, either radiological or endoscopic.
Radiological intervention, and then do what with the 2 lesions?
Angioembolization of the lesion if a spurter is noted.
And
Then
then?
if you are able to see a spotter endoscopically, you can put in a clip or you can do an angiographic embolization.
And then do what?
Now one has come as NHL, one biopsy. So what do you do?
So NHL is a type of tumor which can be treated by chemo. I would first like to stage the tumor. I would like to do an X-ray chest or a CT chest.
Do a HRCT or
HRCT.
a CT thorax and a
CT chest has already been done. No? CT chest
The
is
test has already been done.
No lesions over there. So no. So this is localized to the colon with some pericolum.
rectal. There's a rectal pathology and there's a transverse colon pathology. Anyway, we went in for a resection because she was bleeding. We could not control the bleed, and we didn't want. And it was more of an oozing, We didn't expect that. It was not a spurter. We didn't expect that a CT could have helped. So we went for a surgery, and we did a left hemi. What surgery would you? 1 minute. Don't change the slide. What surgery would you do?
In this case, a left hemicolectomy, since it's a distal transverse and a rectum. So
There's a rectal pathology. So what would you do?
Left
Patient
hemicolectomy.
is sick. Patient is sick. Patient has got autoimmune liver disease. What are the
Left.
what are the problems you're likely to envisage during surgery and post surgery?
Because of the coagulopathy, there is a risk of bleed.
There was no coagulopathy.
1.17.
Platelets were okay, and 1.17 was a play.
That's why you undertook the
So
surgery.
so when he undergoes a surgery, and she seems to be a low melder, isn't it? She's got a low melder, and she's in child A. So what will be the risk of surgery in a child A with a low melder?
About 3-month mortality of about 5 to 5.
No. What is the morbidity of surgery in here?
What are the possibilities?
Child A and child A and a low melder.
So the Mayo.
What will be the morbidity you will say for these patients in a child A?
About 5 to 10%.
Yeah, 5 to 10% is what you do. Okay, what do you expect her to? What are the expectations? So this is she is a well-versed and everything. There is a well-circumscribed circumferential population with a rectosigmoid. I say probably the distal trans. So what is the surgery you can do on her?
Left hemicolectomy would take care of both the lesions.
So we'll do a colostomy. No?
Extended hemicolectomy. But sometimes if it is a lymphoma, it is bleeding, they will do it, and they may not do a primary anastomosis. They may just come out with a ileostomy or a colostomy.
Colostomy.
Because what is the problem? What is the problem? Why will not they do it in emergency?
Because giving away of the anastomosis and
there can be an anastomotic leak.
leak.
And in the presence of and what is the albumin? Albumin is low.
Albumin is low.
Exactly.
Low. So what they would have sometimes what they do is they may just do the left hemicolectomy. They won't even may do a colostomy. They may just come off with the ileostomy. Much easier to do off an ileostomy, and later they may come and do the whole. They may do it off. So it depends on where this thing lead can.
So it is safer to have, because and the other thing is she may also decompensate. So they wanted to have a short time for the surgery.
Second thing is you need to anticipate a lot of collaterals. When the patient has got a portal hypertension, you realize to have a lot of collaterals.
Exactly.
So what in the they may not, if you go near the colon, there will be a lot of collaterals. So the best thing is just quickly do a resection, then close the ends, and then probably just exteriorize with the ileostomy.
Exactly.
The ileostomy, and then once she settles down, so
this
the
exactly
problems you can possibilities you can anticipate is, first in ileostomy what happens, there will be a large output. It will not be as large as when you do a proximal bowel exteriorization, but initially before that absorption of water before the ileum list, there will be a lot of output from the ileostomy.
The ileostomy. So because
if the ileostomy output is very high, what do you manage?
So I can give octreotide as one of the.
You can give octreotide. Another thing is 40% or 50% of volume can be refed. It can be refed. That's the other thing. So you can refeed it. Number one. So number two is what are the hepatic complications post-operatively you will do.
So post-op decompensation can occur. She can develop ascites.
Should you stop azathioprine in this patient before surgery, or you can continue?
I would stop azathioprine. And,
why should you stop?
Why should you stop azathioprine?
Why should you stop azathioprine?
You don't need to stop azathioprine.
Why should you stop it? You don't have to stop azathioprine. Depenicillin, yes. You have this antifibrotic, no, right? So that's why in pregnancy.
Continue azathioprine because the platelets are normal treating, but you can anticipate a fall in albumin. She can develop ascites. Because of surgery, if there has been an element of hypotension, they can have an ischemic hepatitis on a pre-existing cirrhosis. So post-operatively, and if you see large collaterals, that means there's a bigger portal hypertension. So what do you do post-operatively? You have to give her albumin.
She'll require.
So the complications she can develop is that she can develop jaundice because of ischemic hepatitis over a cirrhotic liver. She can develop portal hypertension can be rampant, and then she can develop ascites due to portal hypertension, or because albumin is still dropped after a surgery. So you need to maintain her on albumin. To sustain the liver, you put her on N-acetylcysteine infusion. And the third thing is, your large collaterals, you need to give them terlipressin. So these three things need to be taken care of in this patient before we do this thing, because day before yesterday only we operated on an alcoholic cirrhotic liver with the intussusception of the small bowel. So this is what we did. So these people just could not go in and do, because there were large collaterals. So they resected, brought out an ileum at the moment, and then they're okay with it now. So, but the large collaterals can always produce. So you need to control the portal hypertension and make sure that they don't go into these decompensation. Okay, now if the biopsy comes,
So basically, this is exactly what happened. When they opened, they found there were huge collaterals around the splenic flexure. So they did a left hemicolectomy and they exteriorized the ileum. So, Bhargav, next slide. Next slide. We had an immunohistochemistry report from the Apollo hospitals, and they had reported possibility of lymphoproliferative disorder, suggestive of a NHL. I think it was NHL. Almost all the markers were positive. Okay, so this report just came just before and EBV was positive. What's your comment on that?
Is this...
So you have azathioprine, you have a lymphoma.
It's one of the risk factors for developing lymphoma, Epstein-Barr virus. So,
exactly. So EBV is a risk factor.
For NHL.
For NHL, especially in an immunosuppressed patient. No? Behaves just like your PTLD. Just like your PTLD. And again, you have EBV related PTLD. So it is possible that the patient was always an EBV positive and developed lymphoma secondary to EBV. So now you have azathioprine related, it could be EBV related, whatever it is. Okay, next slide.
But azathioprine is too early.
Too early.
It could be EBV related NHL.
Yeah.
Now, how do you treat now that in the setting of cirrhosis?
Next slide, Bhargav. Just show this specimen. Next slide. So this was, you can see the two pathology. That was the resected specimen. On the right side, that is that ulcerated lesion. Okay. So the report on this particular, what happened was, now I'll just tell what happened, then we'll take up the question. So we got a report yesterday from our local pathologist that it looks like Hodgkin's. They found large cells like Reed-Sternberg cell. And they said it was Hodgkin's. But today he came out with one other suggestion. It's called as EBV positive MUC lesion. It's called as mucocutaneous ulcer, which is actually just an ulcer, which is not even a lymphoma. Okay. So it is what he said was when they had a good chunk of tissue. It was all serous. It was only fibrotic, and whatever lesions you see was not even a lymphoma. It was only ulcerated lesion. So these are one of the rare case reports of an EBV positive. It's called as mucocutaneous ulcers. With that scleroderma, now we have to look back retrospectively to see whether she does have some of the mucocutaneous. Next slide. I just finished this, then you can question. Next slide. So this is the final impression of the pathologist. Okay, so I just show you 3 slides on what is this, and then we can continue. Next slide. So this is one particular study in 2010 where they had 26 cases with a median age of 77 years. EBV shows circumscribed ulcerative lesions in various types of immunosuppressed patients. And they had 6 patients, 9 cases in the series who were on short-term azathioprine, methotrexate or cyclosporin, and the rest 17 were age-related immunosense. And they have seen lesions in the GI tract. They've seen cases in the oropharyngeal mucosa and also in the skin. Okay, so this is some distinct entity. It was a surprise for us because until yesterday they said it's Hodgkin's. So one report was saying NHL, one report came as Hodgkin's. And then when they did the repeat immunohistochemistry, they got shortlisted. They got one more opinion from CNC Bellon, and they finally said that this could be the report. Next slide. Next slide. So histologically, this is it's almost typical like a lymphoma. Polymorphous infiltrate with atypical large B cell blasts, often with Hodgkin and Reed-Sternberg. So this report, which he said yesterday, was actually like Hodgkin's, okay? But today, after further analysis, but what he said was this was very strong for CD30 with positivity for EBV. So this is rare. The discussion up to now is fine, okay? Don't worry about this. This is just to tell you that, I mean, we have discussed everything. Azathioprine related, we discussed. Then we discussed about the Then the person even thought of IBD and its associated dysplasia. Okay, then LVK considered a total distinct entity of adenocarcinoma. All these you have to consider and differentiate. Yeah. What comes out finally is a totally distinct entity. You understand? So this is some new entity. So, and on a background of autoimmune hepatitis, hypothyroid state, and a possibility of a scleroderma. That is yet to be evaluated. Because today when I saw her in Brown's 2 days back, I said this looks like scleroderma, not knowing that this would be the diagnosis, mucocutaneous. So she has mucocutaneous lesions apparently. So they were suggesting whether we should get that report because this particular entity does not require treatment. If you stop the immunosuppressant, the ulcers heal, it seems. So the bottom line, you see, if you stop the immunosuppressants, these ulcers heal. But in a bleeding ulcer like this, I mean, I think we discussed across and we had discussion with the colleague who had referred the case. And we decided to go for hemicolectomy because we wanted a chunk material to know what the diagnosis was. Okay.
The IR would not be able to provide that.
Yeah. Okay, LBK, you had 1 or 2 questions at this end. You can just summarize and just.
But is it because it's only the ulceration, or is it NHL with this mucocutaneous ulcers?
That's what. So yesterday's report was totally because that was came as NHL from one of the other hospitals, and then we got a report of Hodgkin's. And today there was a revision of all the IHCs, and then they had a discussion with CMC Vellore, and then they came out that this is one of the rare cases of EBV related muck.
Maybe we just have to follow it up and see.
Yeah. And they also said that some of these can progress to lymphoma.
Lymphomas. The other thing is that now you can probably do a PET scan to see there's any other.
Now we have to do PET. Yeah, once
do a PET scan to see there's a lymphoma, man. There is a.
Yeah.
This could have been there.
Sure. Okay. Any other? So summarizing. So what will?
If this has been a lymphoma, what will be the problems of treating her?
Bhargav, can stop sharing.
Any immunosuppressed, if you further give chemotherapy for lymphoma,
the patient has got cirrhosis of liver.
Chronic liver disease, it can exacerbate conditions like bacterial peritonitis. That will be.
So they can decompensate this thing a lot. Okay. Because one of the drugs they may use is rituximab.
Rituximab, that's what they've suggested.
So now they have used it. Now they're going to use rituximab, and she's got chronic liver disease. So what are your thoughts on this?
What are your thoughts on that?
So 2-3 things. One is, as I said, one is SBP, risk of developing infection. Second, if there's a chronic inactive hepatitis B, there can be reactivation of hepatitis B.
So you need to take her anti-HBC total and HBV DNA viral load. And if she is negative, you have to vaccinate her and then go get it. So how do you vaccinate them? When you want, say, the patient, they want to start rituximab in about 4 weeks' time.
Yes. So I would like to vaccinate, then check for the anti-HBV.
No, sir is asking you, how would you
They
vaccinate?
want to start rituximab in 4 weeks' time.
How would
She
you
is
vaccinate?
anti-HBC negative and she is HBV DNA negative. You need to vaccinate them. So what is it?
Sir has discussed this. No, fast track vaccination.
Fast track vaccination.
What is it?
Accelerated.
What is it? What is fast track? He's discussed this so many times. Last 8 months.
07, 21. 21 days. And then fast track it and then you go. So rituximab. And the other drugs can also cause?
Yes, sir. If they use prednisolone as part of the CHOP regime, that
They
can
can't
also
use
cause.
Yeah. So that is all. These are the problems you can face. So most commonly they will use rituximab in this, and so you need to be looking for the activated DNA. If you use cyclophosphamide and all, there can be problems of decompensation. Again, on a fibrotic liver, using a methotrexate can also be a problem.
Delhi is a problem. She also had gallstones, okay? So actually we wanted them to do a cholecystectomy. What's the problem of cholecystectomy in a liver disease? The gallbladder will be tethered to the liver. So generally they never do. They do only cholecystectomy and decompress the gallbladder. But since it happens and patient was sick, they did not do the cholecystectomy and they came out with the patient, okay? So the learning points are very important. Lower, this is actually a GI bleed, upper versus lower GI. In a patient who's also got abdominal pain, you people are lucky that we're already giving you the history. But most important, the exam would be, if you do not take charge of the history of the abdominal pain, you would have missed the diagnosis. And you would have hung on to Meckel's and diverticular diseases and polyposis coli and missed the actual diagnosis that the patient has. Okay? And please read that paper on azathioprine and lymphoma. Very important. You must know that paper. It's a landmark paper. Like I said, people have used azathioprine for 20 years. And the risk of lymphoma in the general population in patients who are on azathioprine is almost the same. There's no increased risk. Although cases have been reported, so we try to link up the two. Okay? Good. Thank you. Who's the next person presenting? This is a short case ward round, please.
Thank you, sir.
Who's presenting, Rohan?
Ma'am, Karthik was.
Karthik. Actually, I wanted LBK's PG to take up this case.
Huh?
I wanted your PG to take up this case.
Okay.
I put it in the link, but I think. Karthik?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sir will just lead you on. Good evening.
Good evening.
Bhargav, we can have the second set. Yeah. LBK,
Yeah. ma'am.
start off, Karthik.
This is a 17-year-old female who presented with complaints of mild yellowish discoloration of the eyes since 2 months. She had no history of high-colored urine, fever, abdominal pain, vomiting, altered bowel habits, loose stools, cardiorespiratory symptoms, or altered sensorium.
So what are the possibilities? Just jaundice.
She just had, they detected yellowish discoloration of the eyes, but she never had any prodrome. She had no abdominal pain, she had no vomiting.
So any cholestatic symptoms or any no pruritus?
There's no pruritus, there's no prodrome, there's no arthralgia, nothing. She was found to have some discoloration in the eyes.
What are your differentials?
Asymptomatic icterus, where all
Yeah, that's all. Differentials for an asymptomatic icterus. Quick. You should
yes,
be on your fingertips.
Ma'am, it can be it could be because of hepatitis B.
Asymptomatic icterus. Supposing somebody comes and says that my daughter's eyes are looking
okay.
yellow. She has no history of height, there no history of prodrome, no previous history of jaundice. Everything is going on. That's how they come to you, and they'll come to you 2 to 3 months after treatment everywhere this way. But they'll say that patient would have been feeling my daughter is not eating well, and they'll found this child will have icterus. Then they go to all sorts of camp, and then they come to you. So somebody was found to have asymptomatic icterus in a 17-year-old female. No history of prodrome, no high colored urine, no abdominal pain, no vomiting. The mother felt that she was not eating well for her age.
Okay.
So she found, and then slowly looked at the eyes were looking yellow. Immediately, the next moment, they are with the local people with the camp.
Okay.
That's
Sir,
why he told you there is no history of high colored urine, there is no history of fever,
Correct.
there is no abdominal pain, there was never a vomiting. All say that there is no prodromal symptoms.
Karthik, you can't take this long, okay?
Yes,
A person, just 1 second.
Somebody
See,
comes in your
jaundice
clinic,
and normal urine color, what is your
asymptomatic.
differential? What is your
ma'am, it could be Gilbert syndrome, ma'am.
Yeah.
unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia?
Unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia.
Exactly.
It can be.
You can't take this long to come out with this information.
So
it
you
could be
cannot. So it could be congenital jaundice, unconjugated or conjugated hyperbilirubinemia.
What else?
Unconjugated will be Gilbert's and
Unconjugated will be Gilbert's and Crigler-Najjar, sir.
Crigler-Najjar. Crigler-Najjar will have much more deeper jaundice.
Much
and
deeper
become
jaundice,
much
yes,
younger GC.
Yes, sir.
In conjugated, it will be
If it's since childhood, then it will be Dubin-Johnson and Rota, sir.
Rota syndromes. Okay, number 1. So
What will
it
be
is
the urine? 1 minute. What will be the urine in Dubin-Johnson?
It will be high colored, ma'am. Conjugated hyperbilirubinemia.
Exactly. So bile pigment will be positive.
Yes, ma'am.
Bile pigment will be
and
positive.
that's
What
what
are
will be
the
positive.
other causes?
Ma'am, consumption of medication, ma'am, can be because of consumption of.
Hemolytic anemia, yeah, hemolytic. What are the causes
Hemolytic
of
phase.
conjugated?
So one is
Hemolytic.
congenital jaundice. Number 2 is hemolytic.
Hemolytic anemia.
In hemolytic, if a mild icterus can come with which areas?
Sorry, sir.
In hemolytic jaundice, where can you see in which cause of hemolytic you will see mild icterus?
Sir, G6PD deficiency, sir.
More common, yeah. More common will be spherocytosis,
Hereditary spherocytosis.
sickle cell trait, thalassemia trait, sickle cell trait. Okay.
What will be the findings in
B12 deficiency.
B12 deficiency? What will be the findings in carotenemia?
Carotenemia will also present with yellow discoloration of the sclera in the absence of, but the patient will give history of high colored urine also.
And most importantly, the palms also will
Arms will be,
The skin also will be discolored.
skin will be yellow. Yeah.
somebody comes with anictric, somebody comes with anictric hemolytic. These are the few things which you will think of. Okay, asymptomatic icterus. This thing. But the point here you would have noted that most of these asymptomatic icteric patients will come to you after going through a host of many medications.
Yes.
Okay. So you should come out quickly with this. Okay, then you said G6PD. G6PD deficiency will not show small hemolysis. There's no problem. G6PD will get precipitated by few drugs.
Drugs.
So when do you suspect G6PD? Somebody comes with, say, viral hepatitis A, and the bilirubin without cholestasis is 60. You will have G6PD deficiency. Okay, so mild jaundice, no symptoms. These could also be the causes of this one. B12 deficiency, mild hemolytic diseases, and then you can have this congenital jaundices. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide, please.
She took native medications for the above mentioned complaints for 2 weeks. Details are not available. She developed diffuse abdominal pain following this, associated with vomiting and hiccups. And she also noticed weight loss of 5 kilos over 2 months.
Okay, what else you want information on?
So this
That's what I told you. The moment they say the child is feeling tired, mother finds that she is not eating well, and they find the child is ectric, they go to a native medicine. I don't know about in Chennai, but in this area, especially with your Kerala bordering on, most of them land up there and take native medicines for 2 months. So she took Siddha medicines for 2 months because that consultant said she has got jaundice. And that's why she is feeling tired. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So what else you wanted here?
Sir, the abdominal pain, sir.
The abdominal pain was more in the epigastric. Occasionally, it was there in the periumbilical region. It
So
was not. What else you want in the abdominal? You tell me. She has got abdominal pain. What all the history you want in abdominal pain?
Sir, the onset of the pain, sir.
It is not related to food. She has intermittent abdominal pain. It is not related to food. Then what else you want?
Sir, it was any other radiation of the pain.
Diffuse abdominal pain, no
Any
radiation to the back. The
aggravating
moment
or
she has
relieving.
abdominal pain, she feel like vomiting. She'll vomit.
And was the pain relieved with vomiting, sir?
No, it is not relieved with vomiting.
Okay.
So the pain was in the epigastric, occasionally
And
the small bar in the periumbilical region. There was vomiting. Vomiting was not relieved with pain. What else you want? There was no distension of the abdomen
No abdominal distension.
with abdominal pain. Okay? And it was not related with food. It was
Okay,
not
so the
related.
vomiting,
There
whether
was
it was
no important thing is, was there a nocturnal pain or hunger pain? There was no nocturnal pain, there was no hunger pain. And is this associated with any GI bleed? No, there was no melena in these patients.
okay.
So
And
these
the
are all the
vomiting was
things you will
non-bilious,
ask.
sir?
Wait 1 minute. You ask in a patient who comes with abdominal pain. And about the vomiting,
So about the vomiting, whether it was bilious, if it was post meals
it
or
was bilious. It was bilious whenever she is not had food and vomited. When she had food and vomited, she would had vomited all the food.
So the vomiting post meals, sir, the duration post meals after which he had vomiting, whether it was associated with any other, what was the content of the vomitus, sir?
That's what I'm saying. When she had food and she vomited, it was all food. When she had abdominal pain, when she was not having any food during intermittent, she vomited bile.
Okay.
What else would you ask? Volume is important.
Yes, ma'am. The volume of the vomitus, sir.
If it is large and copious, then there's a possibility that it could be, although Sir said there is no relation to food intake.
Food or intake or something. And the pain was not relieved with vomiting.
So what is this pain? What are the causes of pain? The pain that occurs in these patients, what are the possibilities? Is it luminal or non-luminal?
Ma'am, this appears to be luminal because of the.
It appears to be luminal. He said it's not related to food intake. He said there's no relation to food intake. It's a continuous pain, disturbing at night. It's a continuous pain. He says there's no relation to food intake. So obviously the luminal goes off.
Ma'am, but pain, the vomiting was bilious.
That's okay. So the vomiting is actually a reflex phenomenon. You know, if a person is ureteric colic, they'll vomit. If a person has a gallstone pain, they'll vomit. It's a vent. You know, you want to relieve the pain by vomiting or you pass stool, but it's not a true pain arising from that particular organ as a cause for the symptom.
Symptom.
Exactly.
We're not able to really localize symptoms.
A patient with coronary artery disease can vomit.
With the vomiting. Okay, we cannot localize here.
You cannot localize it. So it doesn't look as if it's luminal based on the history.
She also noticed weight loss of 5 kgs over 2 months.
So she also has significant weight loss. It was also associated. Was it associated with reduced appetite?
Yeah, it was a reduced appetite. She was not able to eat, and she had some aversion to food.
Okay.
You think it is psychogenic?
Important other thing you should ask is whether she stopped Siddha medicine. Did she stop the native medication? I told you she was taking Siddha medicine.
For a period of, yes, sir.
Sometimes they take Siddha medicine, they do well, and after stopping Siddha medicine, they keep vomiting. What do you think that could have happened?
So steroid content in the Siddha medication.
Siddha medicines can contain steroids, and many times you will find that the steroid, your adrenal axis is suppressed, your HB axis is suppressed, and they may have steroid withdrawal symptoms. That's also a possibility. That's what initially we thought. We thought this could be probably a steroid withdrawal, but we are not able to localize whether it's a small bowel or a thing. The pain was diffuse. It was with vomiting. Vomiting was not relieved with the pain was not relieved with vomiting. The pain was not related to any food, and there was no specific time. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It was neither it was pertaining to upper GI tract or small bowel.
Could it be psychogenic?
Ma'am, since the
17-year-old.
yes, ma'am, 17-year-old, we could ask for other history of psychiatric disorder or any body image distortion, but the history is only 2 months.
That's
So-
okay. Change of school.
Change of
Any
school, going to
psychiatric.
college.
That's what I thought in the OPD. I thought
SMA
Any
syndrome.
associated headache, yes, SMA syndrome can present like this. Sudden weight loss can precipitate vomiting and.
Right. Can we move on?
Yeah.
No prior comorbidity.
There are no prior history of surgery. There are no prior comorbidities. She has attained menarche when she was 13. Her periods were quite normal. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Any other history?
When can you get a psychiatric manifestation with an abdominal pain?
Madam,
And the urine is brown color.
porphyria, ma'am.
Porphyria. I used to make a diet and make diagnosis of porphyria.
There was no arthralgia. The history of atopy, no? History of atopy. How do you know that this cannot be? This can be sometimes you need to think like out of the box. History of atopy, because can this whole thing be an eosinophilic GI disorder which can produce things? So history of cough, history of atopy. Was there a rash? Was she getting any urticaria with food? All these things should run into your mind in this particular patient. Okay?
Yes.
Honestly, the OPD, when I saw her, I thought it was psychogenic. Till they told me that there is possibility of, but they said that she was just not able to eat, and patient was not able to sit in the OPD.
Next slide.
Okay. Personal and family history: no addictions, normal menstrual cycles, mixed diet, no family history.
Next slide.
1 minute. So what do you think of these things? Now she's got what are the probable diagnosis?
Sir, sir, at this stage, sir, so a patient with yellowish discoloration, asymptomatic jaundice, who presents with vomiting and
the 2-month history of Siddha medication.
sir,
Now
2
has
weeks,
vomiting, weight loss, and inability to eat, and abdominal pain.
and abdominal pain, sir.
We are not able to really localize whether this is from the upper GI tract or from the small bowel.
Small.
Okay, she has no bowel symptoms. So what are the possibilities?
Sir, one is it could be because of the sir, in metabolic causes we could think of
No. Think of a mucosal causes.
Okay, sir.
One, can it be some sort of a drug-induced mucosal disease which can happen in the stomach? Number one. Number two, you can think of an associated H. pylori gastritis. Okay?
Yes, sir.
We are not able to say whether she is obstructing or not. Then you can think of an eosinophilic GI disorder.
Eosinophilic gastroenteritis, yes, sir.
Thing. You can think of a celiac disease, because celiac disease can come with any of the
all the said manifestations could be
when somebody has had a mild jaundice, anetric, and comes with a recurrent vomiting, abdominal pain. Very uncommon to have abdominal pain and B12 deficiency, but that also can come with recurrent vomiting. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So these things will run into your mind.
And whether the
metabolic diseases, you will think of possibly a reduced HPA axis suppression due to a Siddha medicine with exogenous steroids. Then,
you
can think of an abdominal migraine.
SMA syndrome.
You can think of an SMA syndrome. You can think of porphyria.
Hypercalcemia.
You can think of metabolic syndrome like hypercalcemia.
You
can think of you can think of hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. Then
any food allergies, sir, if she consumed.
She didn't have any food allergies. That's what we said. We have to ask a history of atopy or eosinophilic GI disorders. Now has also been included in the allergic disorders of the GI tract. I think we have a broad differential diagnosis in this. Go ahead. Okay, and you need to think of as Madam said, psychogenic vomiting. In psychogenic vomiting, the most common thing is somatoform disorder with depression can come with this sort of vomiting. And they all remember in India, psychiatric illnesses do have tremendous weight loss. It is not very uncommon to have weight loss even in IBS in India. Okay, even though the books say this thing, but you can still have weight loss because people think that if they eat food, they have diarrhea, they'll stop eating food. So that's also there. I think these are things which you will think of.
Yeah, and the other thing is unrelated. No? Jaundice as one of the congenital and unrelated, and the abdominal pain and vomiting is totally different. So I think you'll have to keep balance both so that you're not in for a surprise. Okay, next. So on examination, patients got jaundice, mild, pallor is present.
Pallor, stress, and mild periumbilical tenderness.
Other systems are normal.
Bowel symptom normal. There's no mass palpable. There was never bowel sounds were normal, mild periumbilical tender. There was no palpable bowel mass. There was no palpable mass. There was no free fluid in the abdomen.
Okay.
And she had other systems which are normal.
So differentials remain the same, I think, no?
Differentials will almost be same. We have not really
Yes, sir.
localized to any particular thing in this patient.
How will you evaluate?
Ma'am, we start with a complete blood count and a blood biochemistry with complete blood count, liver function tests, and renal function tests, including serum electrolytes.
Urine examination?
Uh, oh yes, ma'am. Urine examination. as well.
Urine routine,
Urine.
urine this one and this one.
Peripheral
Imagine
smear?
sometimes undetected diabetes. They can come with vomiting. So you can need to look for urine ketones. You can need to look for urine for phosphobilirubin.
And peripheral smear?
Very first, ma'am.
Because you thought of
She has
hemolytic,
pallor as well.
hemolytic as well. So peripheral smear with maybe a retic count and a Coombs test. Because there is yellowness, but patient is asymptomatic. Examination wise, everything is normal. Next slide. Come on, read that.
Your
Hemoglobin is
hemoglobin is
7.9.
6.9. MCV was 70.3 here for her. HB was 7.3. Yeah, go ahead.
The differential count appears normal. Platelet is 272,000. Peripheral smear shows normocytic normochromic with relative neutrophilia and basophilic stippling. The retic count is 4% and ESR is 87. The total bilirubin is 3.5, indirect is 2.9. The AST and ALT are 92 and 131. And the alkaline phosphatase is 167. The albumin globulin is ratio is normal. So, sir, we have anemia with basophilic stippling and indirect hyperbilirubinemia with around
Transaminitis.
transaminitis, sir. Yes, sir. So for the basophilic,
What else you want?
So for the basophilic stippling, so patient had abdominal pain as well. So maybe lead levels, serum lead levels, we can. Sir, in the
What is your complete interpretation, Karthik, with all this LFT report and the peripheral smear? LFT?
transaminitis with indirect hyperbilirubinemia. This transaminitis.
Transaminitis, there's indirect bilirubinemia, normal albumin, normal protein.
The corrected reticulocyte count should be it should be normal only. So the transaminitis could be either because of the consumption of alternative medication as well. Patient could have a hepatitis pattern.
Hemoglobin is 7.3.
Yes, sir.
Normocytic normochromic.
Normocytic normochromic.
Can we have the next slide? So you think this is anemia, there is a basophilic stippling.
Stippling and transaminitis.
And there is a transaminitis with indirect bilirubin is elevated. There is no AG reversal.
Yes, sir. Creatinine, sodium, potassium is 3.6, calcium 9.4.
Amylase lipase was normal. Next. What else you want?
Sir,
Look at this. Anemia profile.
Ferritin is 352, iron is 87.5, TIBC is 399. Derek Coombs test is negative. Vitamin B12 is 365, which is normal. Stool for occult blood is negative. Hemoglobin electrophoresis is normal. TSH is normal. Free T4 is normal. Cortisol is 10.2.
So we looked at the cortisol. We looked at the thyroid profile. You have normal ferritin. Since there was anemia, we thought, and there was indirect, we looked at the DCT, that was negative.
Parathyroid hormone was elevated 154.
Okay, nothing much, no? You're not getting much information.
Nothing much in this, yeah.
Next slide. Serology negative.
Negative.
ANA profile negative.
CRP is negative. ANA profile.
So it looks like a drug-induced liver injury, possibly.
Possibly a drug-induced liver injury, and that could also have caused a bit of hemolysis and
Anemia. Yeah.
anemia.
Next
We
slide.
need to know why there is a abdominal pain.
Okay, sir. So ultrasound abdomen, sir, because of transaminitis, we can send hepatitis B surface
That's what I
antigen
said,
and
no? Serology is negative.
serology was negative.
We wrote the serology is negative.
Okay.
Both HbAg, our serology
And
is HbAg, HCV, HIV is negative. ANA, young girl with indirect bleeding, ANA is negative. We looked at a KF ring, it was negative. So ceruloplasmin was normal. And she had a mildly elevated bit, but probably she had anemia. So we initially thought we took note of the basophilic stippling. But the fact that she took 2 months of Siddha medicine, we also thought this could be a drug-induced liver injury. Drug-induced liver injury. We have not sorted out the abdominal pain.
Abdominal pain.
But we thought it could be a drug-induced liver injury because of Siddha medicine. And you know, these drugs can also cause anemia. They can also cause anemia. They can cause either hemolysis or they can cause bone marrow suppression.
Bone marrow suppression. Yeah.
So the DCT was negative. And we also looked at if there is any HP axis suppression, but cortisol was normal, thyroid was normal. She is not a diabetic. But we did an ultrasound abdomen.
Subtle wall thickening in the cecum with few subcentimetric lymph nodes in the right iliac fossa and polycystic ovaries. Okay, sir. Sir, CT, shall I read the CT abdomen as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
So circumferential wall thickening in the cecum and ascending colon, query inflammatory. Multiple
enhancing discrete
pericecal and iliac lymph nodes, PCOS and hepatomegaly of 16 centimeters.
So she was only vomiting. She had an abdominal pain. So when we did a CT of this, there was a circumferential wall thickening in the cecum and ascending colon with a pericecal and iliac nodes. What is the possibility? Weight loss of?
Sir, the possibilities would include, tuberculosis.
Good. Tuberculosis is one possibility we thought. Okay. Because she didn't have anything. So we thought of tuberculosis because it was one thing we thought of, because she had a significant weight loss. She was anemic. And of course, the transaminase seems to be unrelated to tuberculosis. It could be drug-induced. If tuberculosis caused something in the liver, it would have caused?
Sir, it would have caused cholestatic zone. Cholangiohepatitic pattern on this.
Cause a cholestatic. So we thought this probably there was a circumferential wall thickening in the cecum ascending colon and multiple enhancing cecal nodes. So we thought, so next what did we do?
So go for a colonoscopy.
Yeah. Can we have the next? Can we have the next slide? We did do an endoscopy because she was vomiting. She had anemia, so we thought of a celiac disease, so we took a deep dual biopsy. And the endoscopy was normal study, deep dual biopsy just showed intraepithelial lymphocytosis. Okay?
Okay.
Next.
Next
So we
slide.
did do a colonoscopy. Colonoscopy showed only terminal ileal mucosal nodularity and biopsies taken from ileum and colonic segments.
Nothing specific.
There's nothing specific. Nothing specific in this. So you wanted. So we looked at all these things. Nothing was specific, but we kept in our mind our basophilic stippling, anemia. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then do the next one. What do you want next?
Lead levels, sir.
Yeah. Can we have the next slide? The serum lead was 49.5.
That is elevated. So
Yeah, it's elevated. No? It's quite elevated. The normal lead levels are
It's written there, less than
less than
5.
5.
less than 5. Okay, critical value is above 75, but you can get symptomatic. Whenever it is more than 45, you need to treat this patient. So the lead levels were very high. So that could probably explain your anemia. You could explain your vomiting, your this thing.
Abdominal
And what
pain.
could have caused lead? So how do you look for lead exposure in this patient?
Sir, we asked for any history of pica. I mean,
There no involvement of the most common lead exposure is in old houses. Your paints go away.
lead paint.
That is one. They don't live in like that. Nobody deals with paints. Nobody deals with jewelry. So we thought of two things. So we looked at the lead levels of the water source. And even Siddha medicine can contain a lot of lead metal, heavy metals. So basically, this was possibly
Because
increased
of the
lead levels due to Siddha medicine. Now we have
conventional.
asked for some samples from the source of water they have to see if there's any lead in the water levels. And she has been now this gum examination. There was no blue line. There was no blue. We don't get that blue line on this thing. But only thing is the pathologist told us there is some basophilic stippling which did. And they picked it up in the second time when we asked for them. So when routinely you send to the lab, somebody sees, but when the pathologist looks at basophilic stippling. So this possibly she has got a lead poisoning causing abdominal pain. At the same time, she's got a drug-induced liver injury due to Siddha medicine. The Siddha medicine has caused her drug-induced liver injury as well as increased lead levels, which has produced abdominal pain. So how do you treat her now? So important thing, you have to look at the source. Is it an old house where all the lead pains are coming off? Are they dealing with lead? Or is she dealing with any jewelry and this, anything else? So how do you treat her now?
We can begin chelation therapy with penicillamine, sir.
Yeah, the only available thing in India is only penicillamine. So before penicillamine, what do you do?
Before penicillamine,
Do you want to look at the urine?
oh yes, sir. For if there is any history of any urine routine, sir, we look for any RBCs and protein in the.
So you need to look for RBCs and protein in the urine. In this case, why?
Sir, because
no, she has taken CAM, no? So CAM already can produce even a renal injury. And lead also can produce renal injury. So lead also can produce renal injury. So you need to look if there's any RBCs in the urine or in this one. Okay?
yes, sir.
So the other drugs which we can use to chelate the lead.
We can use
Ethylene diamino tetracitic acid. That is not available
EDTA.
here. You have dimethyl sulfoxide. This is also one thing. DMSO is not available. So we have only now lead, which we have D-pen. So you need to recheck the creatinine, recheck the urine before you start this patient on D-penicillamine.
D-penicillamine.
What vitamin deficiency they can go on D-penicillamine?
Not aware, sir.
You need to always give pyridoxine to these
Pyridoxine.
so they can
Yes.
go for a thing. And how do you get there? How do you give D-penicillamine?
Sir, D-penicillin. So we give it 3 times a day.
No, you build up in a 70-year-old, start with 250 milligrams, build up over time, see whether she's developing any renal injury. The renal injury can be in the form of proteinuria or hematuria.
Yes, sir.
They can have proteinuria or hematuria. They can come with pedal edema and puffiness of face, or they can come with a frank hematuria.
Yes, sir.
Then you slowly build it up. Okay? So you can, how much of defensible you will give to chelate the lead?
I'm not aware of the
25 to 30 milligram per kg body weight. Okay? That is what you do to chelate the lead. This is the defensible is slightly different from what you treat for Wilson's disease. You give anywhere between 20 to 25 milligrams per kg body weight of this one.
Okay.
So basically, this is a lead. This is because of CAM. She possibly has a Gilbert syndrome. Possibly has a Gilbert syndrome because we have ruled out hemolytic disease by HB electrophoresis, peripheral smear. In peripheral smear, there are no spirocytes. Your LDH was normal, and your DCT. We have ruled out autoimmune hemolysis by DCT. We have ruled out HB electrophoresis was done to rule out any hemolytic disease. B12 was marginally okay. And she possibly had a B12 deficiency. She should have had a Gilbert syndrome. And as is what most of these people end up with alternative medicine. They take CAM and they come to you. The CAM used was Siddha medicine. And that has produced one, lead poisoning, and number two, drug-induced liver injury.
That explains everything. Yeah.
That explains everything. And in abdominal pain, we were not able to localize to anything. But since ultrasound abdomen showed some thickening, we went ahead with the CT, and CT showed some. Occasionally, tuberculosis can come like this. Okay.
So I think a few things is when you don't get a luminal symptom, I think that's the takeoff. When you start considering porphyria, start thinking of lead, start thinking of hypertriglyceridemia, hypercalcemia. These are all those causes where examination of the abdomen will take
undetected diabetes,
ketoacidosis, ischemic bowel. You will not get anything, but at least ischemic you will get some relation to food, But all the others that we mentioned, there will be no relation to food intake. So once you get non-food related, it is non-luminal. That's all. You can sort it out. It's non-luminal.
We have to rule out sometimes eosinophilic GI disorders. We need to rule out celiac. Celiac, remember, can come with any symptom. And anemia can be explained by the DILI or by the Siddha medicine, or this lead also can produce anemia. So lead can produce GI, nephrology, neurological, hematological can cause. So it can cause anemia. A very high lead in children, they can come with constipation. They can come with ataxia. They can come with ataxia. They can come with unexplained abdominal pain and vomiting. So this is basically secondary to CAM. But anyway, we've asked them to get the source of water, and we will give it to our pharmacy college to find out if there's any high levels of lead in this patient. We asked them to get the drug what they have used so that we send it to our PhD College of Pharmacy. They'll give us all the ingredients into that. Because for all the delay, what we do is we send all that medicines if we're able to procure to the pharmacy college, and they give a report. We have found in Siddha gold. The other thing we found which can cause delay is a lot of plant steroids. Plant steroids are there, and sometimes alkaloids. These are three things which we have found. We have found out in all these in Delhi patients when they take CAM. So plant steroids, plant alkaloids, they found a lot of cobalt, they found cobalt, they found lead and gold, and lead gold, and gold. So these things are being found. So it is important that you get this medicine and send for a toxicological assay in these patients.
Sure. Thank you, LBK. It was a very nice presentation. Yeah. Thank you, Karthik. You have to read a little bit. You cannot hold on for nearly 3 minutes or 4 minutes just to think what are the causes of abdominal pain. We asked you the question, jaundice with pain. It's